All right, bro.
Just wait another minute or two here. Let some people trickle in. I just published last month's to YouTube. I completely forgot about it. I was on vacation in the air when you guys had it last time, and I just totally blanked. So that's cool. So now the YouTube publish date is wrong, and it bothers me.
It's all good because at least the order will be correct, right?
Yes, I had to get it out before the next one.
Yeah.
I had Claude generate, I think I mentioned this in the post, but I had Claude generate like the timestamps because it has Google Meet collects all the subtitles. It just auto generates them for the call. So I just had Claude dig through the subtitles and like build like nice chapters. I might go back and have it do that for the old ones. I wish YouTube was a little better at like guessing what chapters should be and letting you review them rather than making you have to basically hard code chapters in your descriptions. It's such an interesting thing.
I can't believe that that doesn't already do that.
I don't know. Maybe you have to be a big channel and they do
Oh.
it. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be too hard. I know that Scott can't make it today. Chris can't make it today. Oh. Cool. Give it one more minute. Good going. All right, we can get going. Mark, is there anything you wanted to kind of share first before we open up for Q&A?
I don't know. I think that there's a few people here that have been using BrighterScript v1 or are very familiar with it. A few people probably are very skeptical of it here. Yeah, let me just get started by saying, like, I approached Bronley probably 3 years ago now or more, saying how I would like to get better type checking in BrighterScript. So just so that it's here for posterity, BrighterScript is basically a language, you know, if you've never heard of it before, or at least this will go out on YouTube, so maybe people will understand better. BrighterScript is like, it's a language that transpiles or compiles down to BrightScript that can be run on a Roku device. The idea is mostly, in terms of the language, it's syntactic sugar, like it's, you know, allowing you to use different syntax and some, you know, nice to haves that are familiar from other languages, and like classes, for example, that actually are just associative arrays once they get down to it in BrightScript, but the syntax is nicer, or at least seems more familiar for someone coming from a different language. So that being said, that's the language BrighterScript. We also have the tooling BrighterScript that does a lot in terms of build processes, validation of code. It will allow us to add plugins, to do different things, to modify code or to check things in our code. It's kind of a, you have to understand that sometimes we talk about BrighterScript, the language, and sometimes we talk about BrighterScript, the tooling, but it's all kind of wrapped into one. The other side of BrighterScript is it's the language server that is used for the BrightScript plug add-on for VS Code. So generally, almost everybody who's doing Roku development, hopefully you're using the VS Code plugin or add-on extension, whatever those are called. And basically under the hood, the thing that understands your code there is the BrighterScript kind of monolithic program. And parts of that are all these other things that I talked about.
And BrighterScript is designed to understand all standard BrightScript as well as BrighterScript, which is how it's able to power the VS Code extension, because it reads that it's a .brs. Okay, well, that's just the standard set of features. And then, oh, it's a .bs. So now we can add all of these additional validations. So everybody doing Roku development is using BrighterScript in their extension, at least for validation. And it clearly understands the boundaries between what you're allowed to do based on file extension and other contexts like your VS config and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that a good way to think about it, if you're used to web development or JavaScript development, is like BrighterScript is kind of like TypeScript. If BrightScript is JavaScript, then BrighterScript is kind of like TypeScript.
Yeah.
In that valid JavaScript is also valid TypeScript, but we get a lot more when you have access to it. So going back to history, 3 years ago when I talked to Bronley about this, it's like, okay, yeah, it's a good idea. So let's start working together to do that. So it's been a long time. So like probably if Claude had been around 3 years ago, this would have been a lot faster. But we had to do it all, artisanal code here, at least most of it. More and more AI stuff in the last few months. But anyway, I'm starting to get used to that too. Yeah, as we were working on this type checking in BrighterScript, it became very apparent that to support that basically required a whole overhaul of how the whole thing works. And if we're going to do that, then what we were going to do is like basically change a lot of how the whole app is structured, or how the whole code base is structured, like the workflows that are happening. And we decided probably about two and a half years ago that like, let's put this into a V1 branch instead of working against the version of BrighterScript that is being shipped, daily, weekly, with updates that go to the VS Code extension that everybody's using. So as we were doing that, let me just share my screen for a second here.
And one of the motivations for V1 also in that, because we're making all these breaking changes inside the structure of BrighterScript, the project, there are a lot of plugins that exist in the wild that Roku devs don't do a ton of JavaScript. Like typically they're writing Roku apps. And so it's kind of a pain to write a plugin and then have to migrate it or fix your breaking changes, because AST is hard. So we really have been drawing that line between V0 and V1 from a plugin interface perspective as well. So when you migrate from V0 to V1 and V1 lands, you shouldn't have to change your plugin again just a week or two later when we make another breaking change and another breaking change. Yeah. So that's also been part of the slowdown of it. And that's on me. There's a lot of breaking changes that I really want to make sure we can get them all in. So when you go from V0 to V1, you're done. You've written the plugin for V1. We've established what plugins look like. And when we have to do a V2 in the future, maybe it's just, enhancements and new features less breaking entire architectural changes.
Yeah. So, yeah, so let's take a look at how things are before we dive into some details, or if you guys have questions about it or whatever. This is the tracking of the V1 milestone for BrighterScript, and like I'm amazed every time I look at this that there's been so much that has changed. There's you can see like how many tickets and issues are open, 14, not very many, and 387 tickets, pull requests and issues closed that have been linked to V1 so far. So like there's been a crazy amount of change. Now our goal, or at least my goal, and I'm trying to make this the way that we're doing this, is like at some point, probably 30. Yeah, well, at some point, this would just be like a change in the VS Code extension. All of a sudden, maybe there's a pop-up. Do you want to use V1 now or whatever? Or it just happens. And hopefully, fingers crossed, for people who are just doing straight BrightScript projects or like BrighterScript stuff, without, plugins that will have to change their interface a little bit. It just works. Like that's my goal. Things that you're used to working still work, but now all of a sudden you get more validation things popping up that's saying like, this is a problem, you should fix it or whatever. And so hopefully as that change happens, it's not too much friction for people. But I mean, even I've seen, updating from V4 to V5 of TypeScript, everything's broken, or at least you need to change, settings somewhere to make things work. So like there will be changes. Hopefully they will be minimal. And for people who are doing minimal stuff, like there should be zero change, at least hopefully. But yeah, let's take a look at what's here. So let me get this up if it's on the screen. There we go. Yeah, so you can see just tons and tons of closed features here that are just, things that we noticed as issues or nice to haves, or as I'm using the code, because my work, the thing that I get paid for, we're using this V1 version of BrighterScript in our production code base, and we have 1 million users a month, and it's a big app for the country I'm in, and where this is the code base is using all these features that is going out to users. So it's still marked as alpha, but if you're ready to try to work with it, it's totally usable as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and in terms of like, I think in general, like we have a giant pile of unit tests, which you can talk about in a bit. But if you're not writing plugins, I think you can generally use this out of the box and it'll be fine. It's just that if you wrote an internal plugin or something that is, pulling in your own color values or width values and stuff like that, there may be some breaks as you jump from alpha to alpha. Yeah, for production code, we're kind of done tinkering with a lot of the transpiling and the outputting, so it should be. Yeah, I'm still calling it alpha because I'm not making any promises, but I mean, obviously you guys are shipping with it, so it's probably fine.
Yeah. So one thing to note, if you want to start looking at V1, if you're in the BrighterScript repo, just switch it from master to V1, and now you're in V1, or at least looking at the code for V1. In particular, if you want to know the changes in terms of like syntax and all the new changes there, also one thing to note is all the syntax changes that have been for V1 BrighterScript, we've tried to backport. So at least you can write V1 style syntax in V0 and it shouldn't complain. But it just doesn't do anything, or do anything special. But in V1, we have a lot of new language features. I could go through some of the ones here. We have things like type statements, for example. So we can create a new type that you can use in other places by using simple expressions in your code. So you can use that at the file level, inside a namespace. We can, import things from something else you can import just a type that is now available. So as something you can use here. And all of this comes down to the fact that, like, I just want red squiggles in my code when I do something wrong. And I've just started using Claude, recently, and to be able to say, like, okay, write this new component or make this refactor for me, and just validate to make sure everything worked out. And it picks up, this field was misspelled. This thing, was referencing the wrong type or whatever, and it just can fix it now because it has so much more information about your code base. So even if you're doing agentic coding, this will help a lot as far as it makes it a lot smoother and allows it to verify the work that it's doing a lot easier.
Yeah, so Claude likes to run your builds a lot as well, and it leverages the fact that you got a syntax error here, a type error here, or those types are mismatched. It helps it a lot with guiding it towards making better decisions as it's learning on the fly, even though it hasn't been trained on BrightScript or BrighterScript near as much. I think those help drive it a lot. So the more diagnostics we have, the better.
Absolutely, yeah. And with that, also stuff that you get all of the built-in types. Are the built-in types like roDeviceInfo or associative array. All of those things are, if you're using them in your code as that type, we get proper validation on all those things, and code completion, so you don't have to worry about looking up in docs or again, if you're doing agentic coding, it's not quite the same, but as long as you're modifying the code, you're getting some of those suggestions as you're going as well, which makes things more streamlined. Yeah. I don't know if I just want to throw it open to questions now, or should we? Anybody wants to see anything?
Yeah, maybe let's open some questions first. Just digest what we have, and then we can jump into some more examples.
Yeah.
Anybody got any questions? I really want to get this landed around Dev Summit. I'm not publicly committing to that yet, but it is a goal. We are pushing internally to start using V1. I know Chris has been working on that the last couple of days, fixing lots of bugs here and there. We found some issues in Rooibush V1 that was mangling files and stuff with the new file API, and just a couple other bugs here and there. So we're leaning into it a little bit heavier as well. We're not there yet, but I am optimistic, but we'll have to see. But I would love to be able to announce that V1 is landed. We're gonna have to figure out a migration path as well. What does it look like? You were mentioning this earlier. What does it look like to just flip it to V1 by default out of the box? We're gonna have to do some detection. Do you have a version of BrighterScript anywhere in your workspace? Well, then we might need to ask you. If you don't have any of that anywhere, well, maybe we can just turn it to V1. You have to ship with a V0 and a V1. There's all these considerations to not just start automatically breaking people's projects that are using plugins, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. I could show some code, or if you guys want to ask some. Okay. So as with a new thing, let me share what our team has been using as kind of a pattern for using types better in BrighterScript. And this is by no means the best way necessarily. It's just what I found is a good way of doing it. So generally what we do, where's an example? And this was all, yeah, here's a good example. Okay. So, so here is a menu row item, or here's a screen. Yeah, this is even better. So here is a screen in an app. Basically, this was just a demo that I created, and I told Claude, I've got to do this thing in 30 minutes, make a small app that kind of uses some of the patterns from our other app. So it did a pretty good job. I haven't looked at all this code yet, so there might be some glaring mistakes, but it runs. Okay, so generally what we do is for a particular component, what we like to do is have a types.bs just sitting alongside the component. What that does is it provides a place where we can define interfaces, and the interfaces live at a level that is easily accessible. So I know if a certain component, you know, has a call func that I need to call, and I want to shape the input parameter for that thing, I can put it in the types.bs and import that somewhere else so I get the type if I need it that way. And so this is the kind of the pattern we're going with, and I'd be open to hearing, you know, other ways of doing that. But basically what we do is we have, if you have a component here, this is just, you know, it has a title and a row list here and some label and some other debug detail posters here. Generally, so again, we have our main screen, or our main file associated, main BS file associated with this.
We call it like a code behind sometimes, is a common term.
Yeah. So we always import the types.bs, and we can import common types as well. So we have like a common here with a utils, a types here. I don't know if this is how I would do it necessarily. I mean, generally I would probably put, again, this is code generated by Claude. I would generally probably put like specific types related to, or interfaces related to things attached more to like the service that gets them. Mm-hmm. But the way that this code is a very minimal project, so it's just listed all in one file. So for example, what this project does is it just loads random images from the internet, from like you know, like what is it called? Yeah, like Pixum, you know, so just like a random image of a random size, and creates like a row list with you know, title and image, and it makes all this data up, but at least it is doing API calls to get it. So what we want to do here is make sure that the shapes of the data are specifically called out, so that when we interact with that data, we're doing it in a type safe way. So so for example, if we're doing this content task to get data out of this, basically the end result is that we're getting this API, actually we're getting menu items out of it, and that typing is all here. So a menu item is, anyway, let's look at API photo. API photo is one of the APIs we're getting, and when we're interacting with something of that type, then we can know that album ID is an integer, URL is a string, and so on, so that we don't. So for example, ID is an integer. In this case, it's an integer, not a string, that sort of thing. And so in case we needed to do something with it, we're operating on it correctly. So for example, in this menu screen that we're showing in the types.bs here, I create an interface that says what M is. What is M in the context of this component? Our convention is just to use like I and then the component type. I hate using I as an interface thing,
Agreed.
but I don't know. This seemed to work. And then you have to specify what is top for this M. And in this case, because it's a menu screen, we can reference that this is the node menu screen.
And that's some magic that we have baked into V1. So
Yeah.
all of your components are dumped onto the roSGNode, the name of the node. So that kind of comes out of magically. So any of the native ones are there.
Yeah. So RGSGNode label, roSGNode poster, that sort of thing. And you can see here, menu item again is that interface from the common thing. So again, here's another BrighterScript neat thing is we have typed arrays. So it's so that when we know we reference a item out of that array or pop or push, it does validation on that array to say like, is this the right type to move in or out of reference from that array? So in the code behind for this component, we use a new BrighterScript feature called typecast statements, and basically what that does is says this thing, treat this thing M as iMenu screen for kind of everywhere below here in the AST in the code. So therefore, we know when we're in a code here, we know that what M is, and all of the items that we know should be on M are in code completion, and things that aren't get flagged as bad or as not there. So we can't do that. So another thing, so we could do m.top, and now m.top, we know that is a m.top. Why did you have property access? Anyway, m.top. So we know that menu screen here has different fields on it. So m.top.error message, and we know that m.top.error message is a string, for example, but we know that it's not m.top.error. So if I did something even like print m.top.error in V0, I could have kept on doing the coding and not realize that would have been a problem. Eventually, that would have been I guess in this case, it would have been invalid. But if you did something like this, that would have been a crash in V0. We wouldn't. I mean, it's a crash in V1 too, but it won't compile because it recognizes that even though you're doing string concatenation here, this thing error is invalid. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There's nothing with that name there. But we know that if we kept on doing it, error message. Whoops, error message. Yep, that should be fine. No red squiggles. So even that takes a lot of processing power and understanding of your code structure and your the whole layout of all the components in your code, and understanding what fields are available and what the things we can do with that are. We can also do things like this is a string, and we know we can't add a string to an integer. So even things like this, we will get now in BrighterScript V1, where it says, this operator can't be used on these things because I know what type they are or what type they should be. And therefore, we can do checking on operator mismatches, on function calls, on all this sort of thing. So for example, again, we could declare my string equals hello. We know that my string is a string. I can do print my string dot mid want to. It knows that my string 2 equals that. It knows that my ms2 is a string because it's doing all the work to understand what the function is, what the result of that function, what the return types are, and going on. It will handle things like this. So here you're redeclaring the type of that inside of this function, inside of this if statement, ms2, or I'll just call it x maybe. That's a little bit easier to talk about than some weird thing. So I do have a lint error here because I've turned on a new feature in BS lint v1, which is about type reassignment, but that's neither here nor there in this case. So if I print x here, it could either be at this point a string or it could be an integer. So now we know that that's a string or an integer. And that makes it so if we did things like print x plus, okay, that should be a bug, or that's a bug. There should be a red line there because this is a union. I'll have to check on that one. But anyway, yeah, we get all this extra data and it checking your code to make sure that things that you might not notice just by reading will be caught and validated. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop talking, and if people have questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I only have one question. No pressure. Generics. When are we going to have them?
V2.
V2.
Yeah.
Nice. No, because I remember them because I was looking at the way you're declaring the interface for the nodes, for the node code behinds.
Yeah.
And one of the things I automatically assumed was like, oh, if I had generics, then I could create a generic, SGNode, whatever, that takes in T and U, with T being a type that extends roSGNode, and then U being whatever properties I want to assign to my M, and then it would generate an intersection there. And then with the, I don't know if the inline interfaces that you guys introduced recently in recent versions, if that also applied to typecast, then you could have typecast M as, well, technically it wouldn't really be that, but whatever. Yeah, so typecast M as node code behind, and then you declare the roSGNode and then an object with the additional properties, which would be really cool syntax actually. So yeah, just something that popped into my head, and I was like, generics would really make this cool.
Generics are amazing. And I don't know if you know, like with TypeScript generics, like they have like code that essentially like runs in your generics at times. It can write for loops for your generic. It is wild.
Someone wrote Doom using just TypeScript types.
Yes, it didn't run very well, but it ran accurately.
Yeah. I wonder if with the Go version of TypeScript it'll better. Something to try out.
But yeah, when's the Go version of BrighterScript coming?
I think it just got released today.
No, I meant BrighterScript. It was a joke. I did not write that today.
Oh, let's get V1 done, and then we'll point some AI at it for a while. So here, like Louis was talking about, here's an example of using inline interfaces. So let's say this is a little weird. This is not how I write code normally, but let's say you have you use this as like a mix-in file. So you would use this as a mix-in. You could typecast M as something like that. So therefore, when you're using this, there's no protection on this necessarily, but except for in this file, you can say that I don't want to declare an interface for this thing. I just want to say what properties it has. So it has name, and that's a string. Actually, get name. Let's say that. Get name of component. There we go. That's not right. Anyway, get name. We'll just call it get name. So, yeah, there. That's what it does. Okay, so so we can just typecast M as this thing. Now, as long as we trust this and we use it properly, therefore we know that when we use M here, it has the name property. The only property it has is name. Maybe it has a name and it has a data as integer array. So we could say m.name plus m.data.0.toString. And we're getting all this nice completion and validation as we go, because the system, BrighterScript, knows what all these things are, what all these things should be, and make sure that it all works out in the end. So yeah, so this is a really nice way, the inline interface for declaring what things are. And here's it as a typecast. That's not really a great thing. Let's use it from let's get name, and instead of typecasting, you can say like, whoops, input as name as string, data as integer array, and then M here. In general, M is treated as an associative array, so you can do anything on it without having any issues. But let's change this to input here. Input.name, input.that. And so that basically we know what that is. Name is a string. The hovers here are a little ugly, but that's just because we don't have good names for things, because that's what it is. Data we know is an array of integers, toString of an integer Again, that's not entirely correct. That's an integer, not an array of integers there, but we'll give a string, and therefore we know the return type is correct. Yeah.
And then you would like call this by passing M in.
Yeah. So yeah. So for example, if I use that here, now I could do print get name, that function I just did. And if I passed in something that was not supposed to be there, for example, nothing, expected different arguments, I could say I passed in name Mark. And it still knows that even though I'm passing in an associative array, that's not the right associative array. So I'm passing in an associative array, but I need something with both name and data. So I'm passing in something with only name. So it says that I'm missing the following members of this thing, data. So I need a data field in this array, data, and that is one. Oh, wait a second. Member data should be an integer array, but I passed it a string array. Okay, let's fix that. And therefore, okay, now we're good. So the BrighterScript is tracking all these changes. It's handling it, and it's BrighterScript v1, I should say, and it's noticing where things are problems and alerting it to you before you run the thing and it crashes. Okay.
I want to point out, you used typecast in a really interesting way where you were declaring typecast n as a certain type. One of the use cases for it when it got freed up to to use as a statement inside of a method was actually type guarding. Like, let's say you have a variable that's of an ambiguous type. You don't really know what it is. It's probably a union because it's something you don't really know, and you have to resort to some runtime type checking. Like, let's say if type is something and you pass in that variable, then inside of that it's if statement, you could narrow that down to a more specific type, right?
Yeah, correct. So for example, we could have so let's say we have a function and we can pass it anything, right? Here it is. It's called foo. We could pass it any input. Let's say, I know there's a whole discussion on how to check if something is actually a certain type somewhere, but let's say we have a function like this, and I want to do something on this if it's a string. If it's an integer, I want to toString it first. So let me see, just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, let's say I have a function called isToStirable. And all this does is I want to know if I can call .toString on it. So therefore, I would like, that's not correct. It's something like
the JavaScript completions there.
I know. We got rid of Copilot, and I'm trying to do one that is like built in, or like anyway. I like Copilot for but we're not using it at work right now. So what is it like? If get interface or something, get interface of X, something like this. What is the way to call get interface?
If to str
object, yeah. If to str does not equal invalid, something like that. Return true, something like that. And if, okay, return false, something like that. Something like that. Let's say that. Let's say that one is there, and I have if is string. I can't remember these things off the top of my head, but it's like if string ops. Sure, we'll call that. So let's say we have if is string input and if. So now we can do something on this thing, but I want to type guard this. I want to make sure that I'm doing this safely and not, calling functions that don't exist. So like before, if I did something like this, I might have something like, I just wanted a substring, for example, and like I have a brain fart and I start using JavaScript, or my stupid code completer here uses JavaScript. Print input dot sub 5, the first 5 things of that. Right now, nothing knows that that's not correct, because input is dynamic. However, as soon as I say, well, I'm going to type guard this, typecast input as string, all of a sudden inside this if statement, it's going to treat input as a string. So input is a string. Wait a second, there's no sub function on this. It's actually mid that you want to use. That's all of a sudden so much nicer to make sure that that's correct. And then you could say like, else if is toStringable input, then we can typecast input as I. And we can print input dot toString. So again, here's a built-in type. We're saying that input has that interface by doing this, basically. And we know that if toString will provide a toString function, and the output of that will be a string.
Yeah. Now, TypeScript has some nice concepts called type narrowing, which is really hard. So in TypeScript, if you had done line 10 is string and you had like the special syntax on the is string to tell the TypeScript system how to understand how to narrow it, you wouldn't have to do line 11. That is definitely not on scope for now. Yeah, it's something like that.
Something like that.
To narrow the type.
Yeah, we need to.
Board, he can do that someday, but for now we have a nice direct way of doing it with the typecast statement that helps just clean up a lot of your code. And you obviously can lie, but if you know you've done the check, you know that that's what this does, then it's a lot more flexible.
Yeah.
And to be fair, if you just have, if you're worried, if you only the only thing you're doing is one line, you could just as easily also do an inline instead of print input mid. You could also do input as string. There we go.
Yeah.
And then that would still work. But if you're doing multiple things to that variable, then the typecast automatically makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Because then you don't need to repeatedly do as string. Right? You're just informing it how it looks.
I'm sure there are some questions, or if there's no more questions, I'll shut up. So how's that going?
Yeah, any questions, anyone?
I'm surprised, NAS, that you don't have any questions.
You want questions?
Yeah.
I got questions for you.
Sure. You showed something with mtop there, figuring out that there is a missing field.
Yep.
So I see it more as a problem than a solution. So because we can always add fields to nodes, right?
Yep.
Will it get a clue that it cannot determine there is no such field by the fact that I'm passing the node around and then say somewhere? Okay, even human will be confused. Let's say I'm passing it somewhere around, and then I have an event handler that gets a key and creates field with the name of the key and the value of the key, or the value of timestamp. It doesn't matter what, right? But the point is that even a human cannot know in advance what field will exist.
Yeah. Yeah. So
part of the problem there is in a type strict system, slapping willy-nilly props all over the place can be dangerous. And so if you know it might show up because you have code way over here that's going to be adding them, you should declare it as one of the items on your interface. Like, hey, it may not always be there, maybe it's optional, but it will be there. But this other one that you typed definitely will never be there. And so
that's great, but can you first answer the question and then do the justification?
Okay, so the answer to your question is that by default, we just added this in this strict mode. So we're still working through exactly what this means. But by default, for V1, strict mode will be off. And one of the options is strict node members. So if you're working on a node, by default, it will basically allow any field and not complain. So it will assume if the field is declared in the interface for that component, it will know the type and it will know, everything that it can about it. But if you've done something like this where you have, and again, this version does not have this new strict handling properly. But if you did something m.top.add field, and you did, I forget exactly what add field takes. It takes field name and a type. So this is not right, but anyway, add field foo is an array. And why is that complaining? Expected 3 always notify means true. Okay. So, but now m.top.foo should exist, right? Like it does. So it should exist, yet we're still giving it a there's still a validation, a diagnostic. So the way we're handling that in V1 is that by default, we're going to have strict mode off for one of the options is strict node members. So by default, this is off, and it would basically not have any squiggly lines on or errors for any.
I got it.
Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
So, okay, this also applies to AAs, right?
Yeah.
There is no reason why the rule for adding or removing should apply only to nodes, but not to AAs.
Yeah.
Meaning, it seems almost exactly the same will happen with AAs.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then two, my question was more, I was kind of like expecting to hear, oh yeah, but you can write a pragma on the side of that line or in front of the line to ignore that error for this particular line and still keep the strict mode. Since you're telling me that you either choose strict mode and behave, or you go with the relaxed mode and then it wouldn't try to guide you. Over.
No, you're absolutely correct. So let me just get this back here where we're in an error state. So you could do this. There's lots of ways of handling this, right? So you could do this. Probably the would be, you could either just disable it, BS disable. I always forget the
colon. I think it's BS colon disable line.
Disable.
I'm open to figuring out a way to make that more memorable because I still forget it.
Yeah. So you could just disable any kind of validation errors on a particular line, or you could disable this one, which is cannot find name. So let's say disable line cannot find name. So you can
remove the colon.
That should have done it anyway.
It's because they're using the property as just a standalone statement, which is
yes,
so
whatever.
if you do equal to foo and then try and disable it,
there we go. Then it would say whatever. Anyway, that's fine. So you could do that. So you could just say I don't care about this error. I believe it. It's fine. Another way that's probably better would to be able to say like typecast it. So m.top as roSGNode. What are we doing? roSGNode menu screen. That's what it's called. And foo as ro array dot foo dot, and now we know that that's an array. So you could be very specific and say m.top is this thing and this other thing mashed together. Yeah. And but I mean, I don't want to write code this way.
Yeah.
This is a little ugly, but you know, you could be super type safe and still do
you can also typecast m.top. Is that at the top of the it's at the top of the function that you could typecast top that way, right?
That's right. I could have done this. So I could say
I think you can do it.
Actually, I would do it here because top is in M. So I would have done it here. And then
you could do that.
And then I don't have to do anything. M.top dot foo dot, and we know what this is an array, so we can call array functions on. I think there's probably one or two other ways of dealing with this as well.
It is not related to properties, but if you just did like var equals m.top as, you could also now that results in a runtime assignment, but if you're getting a variable out of a function, then you're manipulating it a couple of times, you can also cast it there, and that probably can't use the word var though, can you? No. I said var. That's a terrible choice.
Just a little bit more about typecasting. We have assignment validation as well. So here's a neat thing. So let's say we have nums equals 1, 2, 3. So therefore, we know below here, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. Nums is a array of integers. So let's say I have I could say 1 equals nums 0. That's fine. It knows that 1 is a integer. Now let's say I wanted to have 1 string. I could say here, I could do that in 2 ways, right? And let's say I don't know, let's just call this data. And let's pretend I don't know what it is. So I'm going down here. I don't know what data is, but I know it's an array. And I want to make sure that I get a string here. I could do this as string. And this doesn't have any validation errors, even though it knows data is, it's an array of integers. Like, this is not going to be good, but it trusts the developer, it trusts the coder to use typecasting. A better way of doing this would, because what this is doing is saying, whatever's on this side, treat it as a string, save it to this, and now 1 as a string will be string. It'll be a type string. A better way of doing this would be to have this on the other side. Now what it's doing is it's taking this and it's putting it into 1 string, and it's verifying this thing should be a string. Am I getting a string? And at that point, it's saying, no, that's incompatible. Yeah. So there's a few different ways of handling this kind of typecasting as well. This kind of assignment typecasting is really nice, and but sometimes it just makes sense to cast it that way too. So little issues.
Other questions or follow-ups to that?
NAS did have a question about associative arrays. We treat associative
like and if it's even in a form of advice or suggestion, I think that probably maybe should unify the handling of nodes and associative arrays, insofar as the issues that can appear are the same, right? Like, you either know the fields or you don't know the fields, and you either want the strict mode or you want the. See what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not saying as a rule, but it just seems to me that you'll either have issues in both places or you wouldn't have, sort of. Maybe it depends on the kind of developer, right? But whoever randomly adds fields probably adds it both to nodes and to AAs. Over.
Yeah, I guess to me, the way that I've been coding with V1 is that I use associative arrays. I use the type RO associative array anytime I get, like, I want to use, this is just data. This is
like
an object,
like a dictionary.
Yeah, this is there's some data here with some random keys. I'm going to loop over the keys. I'm going to check to see if something's there before I use it. Everywhere else, I'm using interfaces. So I'm using named interfaces usually for, if I had a certain function that took a certain shape of data for the argument or whatever, I would use a named interface for that, because then I would verify what goes into this function and how that argument is used is always matching that shape. So that's how I've been using it, and I kind of am comfortable with that. I understand totally the concept of being more specific about associative arrays. One thing I would love to see would be something where we would know, well, just like how we have typed arrays, to have typed associative arrays, or some sort of dictionary to say, like, the value of this associative array will always be a string or will always be an object of a certain type. That would be amazing. I don't know if that's going to make it into V1. It seems like maybe feature bloat, but and I'm trying to be very careful of feature bloat at this point.
But aren't you doing this for M?
Well, I'm typecasting it, yeah, but like I could.
I guess you know. Sorry, maybe I extrapolated. I assume that this applies to any AA, and
But-
maybe you're only doing it for M, right? Like, I think I heard exchanges that like M, how
Yeah. So
how
at this
brilliant that it will check and blah blah.
Yeah. So M, even though it's an associative AA, we've told it that it's this. And this is an interface that only has these things in it.
Okay.
So by default, if you're using this pattern, I can't do M dot whatever because M is not an associative array. It is a I menu screen. If I wanted it to be associative array, I could do extends RO associative array.
Nice. Under the hood, it is an associative array type.
Yeah.
Like at runtime, it's an associative array, but you're restricting it to a type that does not encompass the global dictionary looking upness of an associative array. You need to express that with your interface declaration if you wanted it to be more flexible.
Yeah.
So, Mark, can you remove the typecast on M just to kind of show how it works when you don't have that at the top?
So don't have the typecast. I'm going to take that out. Let me just get rid of all this other junk I added here. Don't have the typecast. I'm just going to comment it out. No change. But now it doesn't know what error label is. It doesn't know what m.menu items are.
And you can plop a new value right on there, and it's not going to validate it. You can print a value that doesn't exist.
M dot whatever print. It doesn't know what that is. It doesn't know that row list is a row list, so I could mess
Does this
up
apply only to M? Does the typecasting only apply to M or to any AA?
Any AA. So let's say you have a
any variable. Sorry.
Yeah, and any variable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mark, can you show us making an AA inline and what its default type flows through as?
Sure. Just do this just so I have some context here. So I could have this AA equals name Mark. There you go. So AA at this point is you see, let's just print AA just so we don't have any errors. So AA is an associative array. The way it works right now is we have AA, if I do dot on this and do code completion, it knows because it was defined this way that name is there and that name is a string. So it knows that. However, associative array types right now in BrighterScript v1 don't do extra validation. Like they don't, when I say that, they don't put in an error if you put in some other key. So it will know that, let's just make this a statement. So it says, well, it's something on an AA. It's just a dynamic value. But what's nice about this is it still knows, all of the functions or methods that should be on an AA. So I could do AA.count and it would know that that's an integer and so on. So you could also do something like this where you pass in an AA as RO associative array. And same thing here. It would know AA is an associative array. It doesn't, at this point, it doesn't know that name is a string on that AA, but we can use it however we want to. So even like, some key.
Yeah.
And you can do that. That's fine.
Ness, did you have a follow-up question to that?
Well, so back circling to where we started. So I guess your stance, and it may be well informed from practice, is that it is more likely for somebody to add dynamically keys and values to A's than to a node. And therefore, you think that it's more important for nodes to be enforced by strict than for AAs.
I think it's more just we didn't implement strict for AAs yet, but I think there's a benefit to also having strict for AAs.
Yeah, so to me,
the declaration, we just did the first thing because that was the gap.
To clarify, to me, it seems self-evident, but like you, based on experience, it may be. So I mean, in theory, they are the same, right? But then you can say, you know, like my years of practice show that very rarely do I feel tempted to add dynamically fields to a node, and I do that all the time to an AA. Therefore, probably, you know, shouldn't treat them equally. That's and that's fair, right? Yeah. Because I mean, mine is a little bit of shooting from the hip, right?
Yeah,
But the other thing that I think is important here is that, and you said that that one, whatever it was, the BS shush pragma. My concern was like, make it so that people is easy for them to use strict, but there is a escape hatch very close, right? Meaning that they don't give up on BS on strict mode just because there is one really annoying line and it's really hard to, you know. Yeah. So it's either or, like you either throw away the strict, or you don't use such lines when they're needed. But it seems like there is a escape hatch with a comment, so that's fine then. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so when you're using VS Code, thanks to Chris, I think who added this recently, is like the disable next line for errors are right there. So like if you're coming across an error, whatever, you'll get ways to disable. Okay, I have linting errors as well. So I've got 2 errors on this thing, and I can specifically say, ignore this error with a right click. Like it's right there. It's pretty
the
easy.
disable line's right there. I generally lean away from using the disables. Most of the time I prefer having code syntax that expresses a little more intent, but we still have them there. Like that's why they exist, because every once in a while there's not a syntactical way to solve it. Or in plain BrightScript, there are situations where you could turn on BrighterScript validation, but then you just need to disable a little bit more. Like people might want the stricter typing enforcement in their BrightScript. We have JS doc support for types where you can annotate your code in BrightScript, and you might need those escape hatches in comments sometimes because those are valid syntax. But I would lean towards like casting this thing as something that has the right shape before I touch it, rather than just like ignore the line in general, because it expresses a little more intent around the type, and it lets the type system validate it further rather than just forget this.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood and welcome, but hypothetical I had in mind would not be helped by your general case, right? Like I said, I don't know. Let's say I'm writing a library and I don't know what is the field name, but I know I will have to add it, right? And so for that case, I don't want to, I think it's desirable not to throw away the strict mode altogether just because it's really annoying, but kind of be able to say, I know what I'm doing, right? Kind of like just in this place and still keep all the goodness. Over.
Yeah, and so in that specific example, if you were to cast the variable type as row associative array, it turns that strict type into just a bucket that you can reach the way that it would work if we had strict mode for AAs, which I think there's a good case that we should.
I agree that there's a good case for it. I think like that was like for the way that our code base works, and you know, we use AAs very liberally, you know, for sending dynamic event data somewhere from here to there or whatever. But generally we don't change the components very much. Like this component is this component. That's just how we've used it, and that's how you know. So I haven't seen the need in our code base. Having it there is a perfectly reasonable to have that. As
I think.
It's after 4 o'clock. I need to go.
Yeah.
I got to take my son to baseball. Anyway, it's been great chatting with you guys, and I love showing this off. And like Bronley said, hopefully we'll get this out soon.
Yeah. And we don't have to end the call. We can hang around. But thanks, Mark.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye. Have a great day, everyone.
I think one of the reasons you lean away from adding more fields to nodes, setting aside any performance reasons why you could or couldn't, is because you can't just willy-nilly slap a prop on a node the same way. You have to do like an add field or an update to get fields on the nodes. So it's just like more annoying to put them on. And so sometimes you'll lean towards an AA, even though you might have just wanted to slap a field on that node to keep it around. You might lean towards an AA in certain situations because it's just anytime I want, just plop a field on or plop a property on. I'm just reflecting on like why one of the reasons why
I hear you, but jokingly speak for yourself, because I always add fields with add fields method, to which I just add the literal, AA literal, right? So it takes care of everything on the fly and with more than one value.
Yeah.
So it's very easy. But I hear that you are saying it's a little bit more involved.
Yeah, it's not much, but it's enough.
Yeah, there's a little, just a tiny bit more friction. The one other thing, at least on my mind, when I think about nodes as well, I just want to get this in there real quick, is that nodes are actually natively kind of describable, right, via XML, whereas at least an AA really isn't, other than your inline definition of it. But they are kind of conceptually, I end up thinking about them like classes in a lot of cases, because they're prescriptively defined unless you're literally using it as a bucket from its get-go with like an update or something. But if you've got like a component, you've kind of defined your custom button, you've got its fields on it. Generally speaking, it's a self-contained unit at that point. So they're also thought about and used a little differently than AAs just because of that as well.
Potatoes. I mean, the AA literal is the same thing in BrightScript. You just give it the structure and then you start modifying it.
I mean, I think under the hood, like generally, yeah, I just think because there is a way to define them declaratively with nodes, there's just like, again, it's just a little bit more structured, a little bit more defined. And so in your mind, you imagine AAs as a dumping ground and your components as just having a little bit more known shape to them.
Yeah, so to that actually,
it's all nuance. Like,
and when you start using it, in fact, I would say, if you figure out that strict mode is not much of a hamper, maybe that should be the default or the only mode in version 1.0. As long as you figure out that, as long as experience shows that you don't have to use the escape hatch too often or all the time, right?
Yeah, we've gone back and forth on this. I know Chris and I had a fairly lengthy discussion about this. I think ultimately with V1 being so much more opinionated about the types, we didn't want it to be too daunting for devs. It's one Boolean flag away from turning on everything. And I think it was even TypeScript. They didn't turn on strict mode by default until like version 7. So that was kind of our motivation behind leaving it off by default. We want to get people from totally no types to a bunch more help, but not pounding you over the head with it. Flip on the flag if you want to be crazy, and maybe as we get another 2 or 3 years of experience on it all, maybe it could turn into the default, as we noticed that it didn't bother people as much as we were expecting. But yeah, we definitely thought about it for sure. And I would be inclined to just turn it on everywhere. All my projects will have strict mode on. Figure out your types.
No, that's a good point. It could be in version 1.1, right?
Yeah, I'd probably push it to a 2.0 so that they don't accidentally upgrade to it with the way that NPM installs them. But yeah, it could be incremental. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Anybody else have questions about BrighterScript? Or
when are we getting generics?
I know we brought that up earlier, and someday. But we can open the floor to other questions as well. We can keep talking about this too, but just want to leave the floor open for anything.
How generics work actually under the hood? It will just generate lots of code, right, for every use.
So generics wouldn't produce runtime code. It would augment the type system to have lots more types and more type information available. For example, if you were to say, we sort of have generics. Let me share my screen here to talk about it briefly.
I mean, one of the really big advantages to Dynamics, Bronley, is basically having a function where you pass something in and you can get something out without the function in the middle actually knowing like the pass-through value, essentially, right?
Okay, let's say that you define min and max or something, right? It takes two of the same type and returns the same type. You mean like that?
That's actually not even generics. That's just actual types. Generics would be something like I'm writing this in TypeScript.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
right. So if you have a function called getNode that takes the type of T, and then it goes, I'm about to have find node. This is generally going to be like roSGNode out of the box. We don't know any more than that. But if you call this with roSGNode rectangle, my fun box, now the generic system lets this getNode function figure out what kind of type you wanted it to be on the way out. So this would be this type. Otherwise, you'd have to have a function called getNode for each type that you wanted, or you would have to cast it as roSGNode rectangle, which just makes things messy. So it's like an inversion. It's like IOC for types. Like you're injecting the type that you want the function to tell the type system that you're getting back. Without, let me.
Yeah. There's some, isn't there? There's also some like unique ones too, Bronley, right? Where you can basically use generics to look things up by like string key.
Yeah, we're not going to get into any of that crap.
Not us. But
yeah.
But like that's like where it goes, like can go all the way down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it gets
without
really,
generics,
really smart about branching in some situations.
Without generics, when you call getNode, the best that this function declaration can get is that it will be a node or undefined or invalid, whatever it would be. But the moment you're able to pass in a type, the outside can be like, listen, it's going to be this type. You go find it, you do the implementation and return it back to me.
So it won't generate any code. You're saying this is only compile time.
This is compile time information. Yeah, it's to help get more squigglies, more places in your code when you're touching properties that aren't on the type that you were expecting. Or for example, like if it was just roSGNode, but my node rectangle had, I don't know, width or height. This would be a red squiggly if it was just of type node, but node rectangle has width. So it wouldn't be a squiggly if you could clarify that it was node rectangle. And see, like I said, your two ways of doing this are to cast it or pass in generics. Now, this is just one simple example of it, but it's easiest to explain how the generics work. There are way more complicated generics that you can do that really help them. Yeah.
A really good one, I think, is, I don't know if you have the BrightScript language code up, but in utils.ts, we have like a spin async function that takes a callback, and it's using that to pipe that type through.
What's the name of the file?
Utils. And there's a spin async function.
Oh, this is, you said the language.
Yeah, VS Code language. Yeah.
Where are we at here? Where's a workspace?
Yeah. And there's a spin utils or a spin async. Yeah. So like it takes a callback. We don't know what the result of callback is.
Yeah.
Right. But we're saying it's gonna be a promise of something. So I'm basically gonna like bring the type back. Whatever that function gives me, you're going to get back on the outside.
Yeah, so that's one of the benefits. Yeah, for sure. So the example I showed earlier, wherever that was, I don't even know anymore. You were declaring the type on the outside, but with generics, sometimes you can let the type system infer what the return type will be. So spin async takes a message, hello world. And then when it's done, it'll do a callback. And so we'll have it return, I don't know, a number. There we go. This needs to be async, right?
Yeah, I think so.
There we go. So I never declared the return type of this function because it's inferred. Oh, that's what the return type is. So TypeScript knows this function returns a number. And then I pass that function into a function who has generics involved. So I was able to flow this type out through the calling function so that I didn't have to cast this as number. It got it automatically. So there's no mismatching of types, because otherwise if I cast it to a number, there could be a mismatch where the inside changed to a string because somebody was refactoring, and now we have a mismatch of types, so our type system is lying to us. But in this case, the data itself lets us flow through the types.
This is one of my more favorite uses of it.
Yeah.
Is where you're basically you're calling something else, you don't know what it is, but you still get the results of it in your type system flow out to everybody else, even though there's other functions in the chain, essentially, for essentially free.
Yeah.
So you get a lot more narrowing upstream. And then if you define that function again, right, if you were to duplicate 440 to 442 and return something different in a new var, it's just, again, it's inferred it for that line.
This is number. This
instance
is
an async is returned because of the function handed in.
Yeah, I am blown away with how flexible the TypeScript generics system is, and it's for stuff like this where you don't have to manually type your types. You just let it flow. It's really nice. Does that clear it up, NAS? I'm happy to explain a little bit more.
No, I mean, I'm not missing generics. Maybe
Okay.
maybe Luis wants to hear more. But I was just curious. I was just curious because in other languages, when generics were implemented, there was a significant runtime part, like generating. Well, like when you instantiate classes, right? Like let's say class with, let's say, a collection of strings or collection of integers.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might
That kind of stuff. And I was curious if here.
hidden classes behind the scenes. Like C#, I think it ends up compiling a new kind of class for every generic type that you end up invoking at runtime, or declaring at compile time. Sorry. Yeah. No, in this case, we don't have overloading at runtime. It's not an actual built-in feature. And TypeScript even doesn't, like TypeScript and JavaScript, they don't have overloading at runtime. You basically just like value check the parameters on the way in and figure out your branching code. So all of this is modeled kind of after what TypeScript had done, which is at the type system level, help us catch errors ahead of time. And so your generics and your method overloads and function overloads are there to kind of just guide the type system into making more accurate decisions based on your code.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, generics are probably not coming in V1. Maybe 1.1 or 1.2 if we get time. But yeah. All right.
I didn't start trying to prototype it a few months ago.
Yeah.
It got big real fast.
There's a lot of moving parts in there. But I think it can be done. I think we can figure some of it out. We need to argue over syntax a little bit. The VB syntax for generics is disgusting.
Yes.
I don't really want to do that, but we've been trying to stay close to BrightScript syntax was based off of VB syntax, but like parentheses of and the name is just not something I really want to look at. We'll see. Anyway, I think that's probably good for today, everyone. Thanks for coming. Hope this is helpful, and we'll see y'all next time.